Welcome to the Trust Factor Radio, bringing you interviews and insights to unlock the power of the subconscious mind to create authority, credibility, and trust. With your host, the Authority Architect and best-selling author, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is Robert Evans Wilson Jr. He is an author and speaker who helps companies that want to become more competitive by harnessing innovation. He also shows individuals how to think more like innovators. Well, that innovation and that innovator word is definitely something that's always being talked about. So looking forward to this conversation and seeing where it goes. Well, welcome to the show, Rob Wilson.
Well, thank you, Neil. Thank you for having me on the show today. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Rob, and what it is that you do and who you help.
Well, I have just been fascinated by creativity, creative thinking, and innovation for pretty much as long as I can remember. And I've just found that it really enhances your life. It's not just for, innovation's not just for big companies. It's not for the great big corporations that you hear about that are innovators, and there are a lot that are. But to me, it's for the everyday guy. Everybody can utilize and use and harness the techniques, the mindset, the lifestyle of innovators, because it just enhances your life in so many different ways.
So what exactly is an innovator then?
Well, an innovator is someone who is, there's a lot that really comes together that creates what an innovator is. I say it's partly technique, it's partly mindset, and it's partly lifestyle. And the technique is really just where you find ways in which to get a different perspective on things, because that's the real key right there to creative thinking, to innovation, is you have to be able to see things in different ways so that you can, connect things together or combine things into something new.
And one of the things that's really popped up over the last few years is this idea of the shared economy, with things like Airbnb and Uber really, taking the market by storm.
And it's really astounding, especially, with the Uber thing. It's to watch what's going on in New York City. They're freaking out the taxi cab industry because they're providing a better service and at a better cost to the consumer. And it's radicalizing that industry. And that's what happens to everyone. That's one of the reasons I'm pretty passionate about teaching people about innovation and how to live the innovator's lifestyle, because creative destruction is headed your way. It's rolling towards you like a steamroller without a driver, and it's going to hit you. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop it. The most you can do is prepare for it. And for your audience members who may not be familiar with that term, creative destruction, that was a term coined by economist Joseph Schumpeter back in the 1940s in describing what happens when a new technology makes an older technology obsolete. Obviously, the easiest example to give is how the automobile completely displaced the horse and carriage.
Definitely. And when we think about innovation, it really is about problem solving, isn't it?
That's pretty much it. A lot of people will say it's about some other things, but bottom line, if you boil it down to its bare essence, it's really just about problem solving. It's satisfying needs, but primarily problem solving.
So how do you address this with your clients or the companies that you work with?
Well, what I do is, which I think what makes me different from other speakers on innovation is a lot of the other speakers talk about how important innovation is, which it is. They talk about, all these great things that these big companies are doing. But what I do is I show individual people how they can start becoming more innovative. Because see, most people, as have suppressed their natural creative tendencies. This happens as we go through the socialization process. This happens as we go through school, and we are repeatedly taught to conform until we suppress our natural creative tendencies, and we believe by the time we reach adulthood that creativity is a gift that only some people are born with. But it's just not true. It's actually a skill. And it's a skill that people can reacquire at any age. But it's a critical skill. It's a critical skill in today's economy for the very reason I was talking about before, because change is inevitable. It is going to affect your business. I have seen it affect my business multiple times. And you either are adapting to change, you're preparing yourself for change, or you're just going to get steamrollered, as I was saying before. For example, in my own business, back in the early 2000s, I had a vibrant business going to media outlets like radio stations, TV stations, newspapers, magazines, and doing on-site seminars and how to sell advertising. And that business was pretty well disrupted by webinars. They're not going to pay to have thousands of dollars to have a guy fly in and do a live presentation when they can park everybody in front of a computer and watch a webinar for a lot less money. So that was something I had to adapt to. I didn't see it coming quite as I probably should have, but I didn't. There's that happens to every business. It may not be your primary business, but it could be the way you market. It could be any number of things that gets disrupted by new technology.
Yeah, technology is definitely at the forefront of everything here, and you just cannot stand still anymore. You can't create a business and work that business the same way for 30 years. Somebody else is going to come in and take over and find a better way. Talk to me about how technology has changed things.
Well, that example I just gave is just one for my particular industry. I mean, it's happening for a lot of industries. Last night, I had the opportunity to give a speech to a group of CPAs, and I talked about how one of the things that's getting ready that will probably change their industry in the coming decade is artificial intelligence. It's already pretty much wiped out the job of bookkeeper, which of course is way different than being a CPA or an accountant, but it's similar. But because basically there's now software that's a do-it-yourself system that anybody can plug the numbers in, and the software does the rest. And so a lot of small companies that used to have bookkeepers on staff don't anymore because they don't need it. They can have anybody in the office plug in the numbers. And so going forward 10 years, with the advances in artificial intelligence and the way, computer technology is going, that's going to affect more and more jobs. And so that was one of the things that I was trying to point out to the accountants, that their industry is very likely to be absorbed by that. The other thing, too, that's a huge technology that affects their industry is the blockchain technology, which is, most famous for cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. And so this is a technology that is, revolutionizing many things, especially when it comes to, accounting type stuff. So that was just one area of the world. I'm thinking about that because it's so fresh in my mind from last night. But this technology changes everything. As a writer, and I've been a writer, pretty much all my life, and working as a professional writer for at least nearly the last 30 years. And technology has enabled so many people to enter that market, and in many ways, it has depressed the quality of the overall product. And a lot of people who don't understand the quality, might be, confused by what's available, because you can hire a writer on Fiverr.com, but that might not be the writer that's best for you.
Yeah, probably not. I'm just gonna put that out there. So, in the example of your CPAs that you were talking to last night, you're talking about innovation and how AI is going to really come and take their jobs. what can they do to innovate, to move forward, and to move past this problem?
Well, what I do as in teaching people more about how to think and live like an innovator is to enable them to hopefully take their expertise and maybe, kind of see where some of the changes might be occurring so that they can anticipate it. Now, I can't tell an accountant how to solve the problems of his industry better than he can solve them. So what I do is I teach people how to better do that, how to better recognize opportunity, how to solve problems faster, how to deal with change better. That's what I do by teaching people the innovator's lifestyle. And I think that helps people, prepare for it at best. Is really all you can do. Is to if you become more and more comfortable with change, you don't overreact to it. You don't see it as a crisis. And that's kind of an interesting word. I like to talk about how in the Chinese language they have a symbol that they use for crisis, but they also can use that same symbol for the word opportunity, which is kind of interesting because, when you think about it, crisis and opportunity, depending on your perspective, are really the same thing. So, are you going to react to a challenge as an opportunity, or are you going to freak out and think, oh, this is a crisis? And so the more comfortable you are with dealing with change, and that's one of the things I teach, people who are risk averse are never going to be comfortable with change, but they can start learning how to become more comfortable with change by taking baby risks. And I usually suggest several for people to try on just to help them, start getting more comfortable with risks so they can take on bigger and bigger ones.
So what kind of examples do you give to help them be a little bit more comfortable with risk?
Okay, well, how about you, Neil? Do you drink coffee every morning?
I do.
Okay, well, I want you to switch to tea for the next month.
That would be easy.
Okay, it might be easy for you, but for Americans who have always drank coffee, you might have a tea background, but
I'm British, so I go back and forth between the two of them.
Right, but okay, so that's just one for your average listener there who drinks coffee every morning. That's a little baby non-consequential risk that you can take, which just adds some change to your life. Another one is if you read the newspaper every day, there's probably a section or two you absolutely never look at. So I say you go read that section now. If you've always bypassed the sports page or the fashion section, read that. It's just a little change. It's a little risk. It helps to understand what a risk is. A risk means doing something that could cause you to lose something. I mean, perhaps it's only losing time, or maybe it's losing money, or maybe it's losing your reputation, or embarrassing yourself, or perhaps it's a much bigger risk where you're risking life and limb. But for something to be a risk, there has to be something that can be lost. So that's why I say these are kind of non-consequential risks because you're losing a little bit of time, or a little bit of comfort in switching, say, from coffee to tea if you're used to more caffeine in your drink. Another one that I like to have people do is I say rearrange one piece of furniture in your house. And then every time you pass that room, it's going to throw you for a while till you remember, oh, yeah, I moved that chair. And as I told the people last night, I said, I did this myself recently. I acquired a new chair and replaced an old chair and moved it just about 6 inches to a foot from where the other chair had been. But that's all it took for me to go plowing through the room one night in the dark and tackling that chair because it was 6 inches different from the other one. And I tumbled right over it and ended up bruising both my feet, my knee, and my arm. And I said, oh, yeah, so there's even risk in moving one piece of furniture in your house if you forget where you put it. So a couple others I like to share. I said, well, sleep on the opposite side of the bed for a few nights. clients. Now, if you have a significant other, you're going to have to get them to go along with that too. And then you both wake up on the wrong side of the bed. And
those things seem very simple, but we are so reliant on the habits that we have every day. Just little changes like that can really throw your world upside down.
And they really can. And two others that I recommend are try writing with your non-dominant hand, and try brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. So little changes like that, like you said, they'll throw you. Because you get so into a rut. We get into ruts. We get comfortable there. We stay there, and this is why we hear the terminology "getting out of your comfort zone." This is where the terminology "thinking outside of the box" comes from, because that's one of the big parts of being an innovator, is learning to get a different perspective on things. And there's dozens of techniques, maybe hundreds of techniques on how you can do that. It's just finding one that you're most comfortable with. What I usually suggest for people to do, I said, say you've got a problem that you're dealing with. Say that with your company you don't have enough clients, and you're struggling for business, and you're everything you've tried hasn't worked to bring in more clients, and you're stuck with this problem. You don't know what to do, and you might be panicking. So one of the suggestions I say is, ask yourself this question: what would you do if the opposite were true? So if your situation is you don't have enough clients, ask yourself, well, what would you do if you had more clients than you could handle? What would you do in that situation? Now, the purpose of this is to get you thinking in a completely different direction. It gets you out of your rut. It gets you out of that groove you've been stuck in. And as you look at it in a completely different way, that might bring you around to an idea that it might actually work for the problem you actually have.
So it's really about getting out of that comfort zone and thinking differently. Is that what sparks new ideas for innovation?
Well, they can be, perhaps spontaneous. But most likely you're going to intentionally try to come up with a new idea. Now, it's helpful for your audience to understand really what an idea is, because ideas aren't born from nothing. Basically, an idea is when you take two or more existing concepts and kind of meld those, synthesize those, combine those into something completely new. And so that's one of the habits that innovators have, is they're always looking for patterns. They're always looking for combinations. They're always looking for connections that they can, make or imagine. I mean, there's a great exercise just to pick up a couple of objects off of your desk and try to imagine turning that into a completely new product. Pick two things at random. Or just take a single object and go, how could I use this other than its intended purpose? And so when I'm talking with people who tell me they are not creative, I like to ask them this question. I say, have you ever taken a standard paper clip and used it for any other reason than holding papers together? Well, everybody has. Everybody has taken a paper clip and used it for some other reason. And so I say, well, right there, you were creative in that moment in which you, untwisted a paper clip and used it for something else. And so there's many ways of showing people that they are creative and helping them get over this idea that they're not.
So as far as that innovator's lifestyle that you talk about, what do you think holds people back from moving forward and staying with the times, as it were?
Well, one of the things, like we talked about just a moment ago, is being risk averse, because innovators, when you look at the characteristic of what makes an innovator, is they're willing to take risks, they're willing to break the rules, they're willing to abandon the traditional ways of doing things. They love to go off in new directions. They question authority. They question the status quo. They'll say, why do we have to do things this way? Why can't we do it another way, or maybe that way? And so it's this aspect of the innovator that a lot of people that scares them, and so that's why I suggest taking the baby risk to get comfortable with a little bit of change, and then you're able to move and accept a little more change than you have in the past. So for a number of people, to answer your question, is a lot of people think, oh, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. I can't be, putting effort into this, innovation thing. And it's true, it does take time to, come up with a good idea.
Let's talk about innovation in marketing, because that's kind of my world, and the listeners here are really into marketing and looking to the future and what is working now. How do we innovate to become that influencer on one of the new platforms that might be coming out?
Well, good question, Neil. Marketing has some core principles to it that aren't going to change regardless of the new platforms or the new media that comes out. And when people adhere to, some of those, fundamental rules, they're going to be more successful than they would be. A lot of people just think that, advertising is just being all about being as creative as you can be to get attention, but that's not really true. Marketing, basically all marketing is getting the consumer to come to you so that you don't have to go to them. And so how do you do that? What are some unique ways you can do that? But again, like I said, there is a science to advertising and marketing. So that means there are rules that need to be considered regardless of the media.
And of course, there's the people that have been advertising in yellow pages and newspapers for, decades, and that's what's worked for them. And, now you tell them that they've got to be on social media. That's a risk just to step outside and try and jump into that world for them, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But the thing is, they need to identify where their market is. So even if they're getting on social media, they need to find which particular social media that their market is attending. So for example, if your primary market is baby boomers, you probably ought to be on Facebook. If your primary market is millennials, you're going to want to be on Instagram. So there's, different, there's still different market, or there's, different venues in which you need to understand in order to find your target audience. And so, you can craft the best message in the world that your target audience would eat up. But if you don't put it in the right place, then they're never going to see it. And so it's a waste of time and a waste of money to run an ad where it's not going to reach the proper audience. So there's a saying in advertising, a bad ad will draw more from from the correct target audience than the best ad in the world will draw from not properly targeting your audience. So it's better to have your target audience correct and knowing where they are when you choose the media than it is to have the best ad in the world. Of course, the best world would be that you have both, that you have created a wonderful ad and you've got it in front of the right people.
Of course. And there's so many, innovative things now with targeting on the likes of Facebook and Instagram, as well as these live videos, which are, really becoming more and more popular. But it does take that, risk to step out and put yourself out there on these platforms in order to get the most from them.
And I see a lot of these people doing them, and they really need to. I think there's this idea you're supposed to be spontaneous, but I think that truly, that's just not the way to go, because these people get on there, they do their videos, and they just ramble, and you really need to have a really good idea in mind about what you want to say, because you need to say it succinctly, or you're going to lose the attention of your audience in the first few seconds. It's just key that you have a very tight message, even if you're trying to make it seem like it's a off-the-cuff, spontaneous video. Hey guys, look, I just decided to videotape myself right here in front of these fountains because I wanted to tell you about so-and-so. But if it's not interesting, no one's going to listen. And you can't just like slowly warm up to the point where you think you're getting it. By that time they're long gone. So you need to start out right out as fast as you can, with something interesting and entertaining, because that's what it's all about.
Definitely. We're in the attention-getting business. There's so much noise out there. We only have seconds to capture people's attention and keep them engaged. So there's definitely got to be purpose and targeting that right audience. Now, Rob, tell us a little bit more about you and your background. And you've been an author and a speaker for years. What really got you into this line of work?
Well, I've known I wanted to be a writer since I was in third grade. I've just always enjoyed putting words together. And so that was kind of an initial goal, was to be a writer. I really wanted to be more of a novelist and a fiction writer. And when I was in my 20s and couldn't sell any fiction, I started looking for ways that I could make money writing, and started trying out a little journalism and advertising. Found advertising paid the best, so I pursued that. Follow the money, and did pretty well at it, to the point where I started winning awards and started getting invitations from different colleges to teach. And then I ended up accepting an opportunity with Georgia State University to teach advertising, and then that kind of led into my speaking business, because I discovered that there were all these people that needed to know what I was teaching, and so I kind of packaged it as a seminar and started marketing it directly to my clients. And just one thing, it just evolves. It doesn't seem like you just go, oh, one day I'm gonna be a speaker. It kind of evolved out of my writing business, and my writing business evolved out of a desire to write fiction, and which I have done. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
And you said you're not necessarily talking about these big companies like an Uber or an Airbnb or something like that when it comes to your clients and innovation. You're talking about the individual level.
Well, that's every company needs, I don't care how big the company is, they need people who can recognize opportunities all the way down the line. And so it is just a natural tendency for people to constantly look for efficiencies, look for better ways of doing things. And so you need people in your company who are able to notice ways that you can make your company run better, or maybe help you differentiate yourself from the competition. Now, Toyota is a good example. It's a massive company, but they have a policy where they encourage everybody in the company to make suggestions of how to improve things through the year. And they encourage people to literally make, dozens, if not hundreds of suggestions. And a lot of those get implemented. And so, Toyota recognizes that you need to have people who think like innovators all down the line. Other companies, like I think, I think Google gives people 20% of their time to spend on coming up with new ideas. And I think a few other companies do that as well, where they give a certain percentage of the person's time to be spent just in thinking outside the box, coming up with new ideas. Now, but the company has to be willing to not only to give the time, but to recognize and acknowledge when people make suggestions. Because if they don't do this, they can't develop a culture of creativity or a culture of innovation. Because if people don't feel like they're being rewarded or at least acknowledged for bringing ideas to the table, they're going to quit doing that. And that's one of the big problems with companies that attempt to do this. They don't sustain it. They don't really try to acknowledge and reward it, because they really don't want those changes. Because a lot of times innovation really will end up going against your primary business. Look at Kodak as a great example. I mean, Kodak, and most people don't realize this, Kodak invented the digital camera in 1975. And their R&D department came up with this wonderful invention. They show it to the board of directors, and they say, "Look what we came up with." And the top of the business goes, "Oh, wait a minute, we're not taking that to market. Our primary business is selling film, selling photographic paper, and developing chemicals. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot to take this product to market. No, we're not going to do it." And 7 years later, Sony introduces the digital camera to the market, and the rest is history. Kodak is now dying because it didn't adapt, and yet they were the inventors of the technology. It's just astounding to me, but this is the way companies react. This is our primary business, and sometimes the best ideas might go against what that primary business is, and you've got to have a really open-minded management to be able to accept that, and a lot of times they simply can't.
Yeah, it's nice to see that there are companies out there that realize that, the next idea could be the next billion-dollar company, and everybody has ideas. And just like that Kodak example, if you don't act on it, somebody else is going to have that idea sooner or later, and they are going to act on it. So this has been great, Rob. Very interesting conversation. If somebody wants to get hold of you so that they can have a conversation with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can find me through my website, which is robwilsonspeaker.com. All run together, robwilsonspeaker.com, or they can just Google me under my full name. I always encourage people to remember Robert Evans Wilson Jr., because if you try to find a Robert Wilson on the web, well, that's like finding me would be finding a needle in a haystack if you don't know at least a little something else about me.
That's right. It's a pretty common name, I imagine, Rob Wilson. My name, Neil Howe, happens to be the guy who coined the term millennial. So, anybody that's looking for a Neil Howe is probably going to find that guy.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Anyway, Rob, it's been fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. If you want to get in touch with Rob, reach out to robwilsonspeaker.com. Rob, thank you very much for being my guest on the Trust Factor Radio today.
Well, thank you, Neil. It has been a lot of fun.
Excellent. And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
You've been listening to the Trust Factor Radio with Neil Howe. To learn about the resources mentioned in the show and to listen to past episodes, go to thetrustfactorradio.com. To get a copy of the book, The Trust Factor, go to thetrustfactorbook.com. If you are ready to act now and build your authority, credibility, and trust, schedule a consultation with Neil at theauthorityarchitect.com.